Today we will be reviewing special right triangles and all of the properties of the special right triangles. Let's first start by reviewing the 45-45-90 right triangle theorem. Here we have a triangle that is 45, 45, and 90 degrees. The two legs are always going to be the same. That's why they're labeled x and x. And the hypotenuse is going to be the same, x, but it also has a square root of 2 next to it. Let's go ahead and do a few examples of the 45, 45, 90 degree triangles. Starting off with the first one on the left. If I told you that leg was 3, according to the theorem, the side on the left must also be 3. And then the hypotenuse is the same, but it has a square root of 2 in it. There we have it. What if that side were 5? Then we can figure out that the bottom side is also 5. Pretty easy. The hypotenuse is the same with the square root of 2 next to it. And then lastly, if I told you that the hypotenuse is 7 square root of 2, you can find the other two sides pretty easily using the theorem. That side is 7, and that side is also 7. Let's do some more examples, but a little bit trickier. What if I told you that the hypotenuse is 10? How do we go backwards to find the other two legs? I'll give you a second to think about that. Alright, to find the legs, the simple shortcut is to take your hypotenuse and divide it by 2, and then multiply it with a square root of 2. Once you have one leg, the other leg is identical. And there we have the two legs. Let's try that one again, but this time have the hypotenuse be 16. Go ahead and take a second to figure out what the two legs are. Yes, divide the hypotenuse by 2 and then multiply by square root of 2. Once you have one leg, the other leg is identical. Let's try one more example. This one's a little bit trickier because it's a 5. It's an odd number. Now most of you guys are able to divide 5 by 2, which gives you a 2.5, but we're going to try to avoid using decimals and square roots in the same answer. So to do that, we're just going to leave it as a fraction. 5 divided by 2 with the square root of 2. Same thing with the other leg. 5 divided by 2 times square root of 2. Okay, let's move on to the 30, 60, 90 triangle theorem. Notice in this triangle we have a short side, a medium side, and a long hypotenuse, 3 different lengths. The theorem says in a 30, 60, 90 right triangle, the hypotenuse is twice as long as the shorter leg. and the longer leg is square root of 3 times as long as the shorter leg. So look at the picture. Notice that the short leg is labeled x. It is always going to be half the length as the hypotenuse. That's why the hypotenuse has 2x. And then it's going to always be the same as the other leg, but with the square root of 3 next to it. Alright, let's do some examples for the 30, 60, 90 right triangle. In this example, I give you the shortest leg to be 5. To get the hypotenuse, remember we double the shortest leg to get 10. And then to get the other leg, it's the same thing, but this time with the square root of 3 next to it. Okay, let's try another one. Notice the hypotenuse is given now, and it is 16. To get the short leg, you just take half of the hypotenuse. And then to get the long leg, it's the same thing, but with the square root of 3 next to it. One more easy example. Notice the long leg already has a 2 square root of 3. So to find the short leg, you just use the number in the front, the 2. And then from there, to find the hypotenuse, you double. 4. Go ahead and take a look at the patterns in all 3 examples and try to remember them. Now we're going to do some tricky examples for the 30, 60, 90 degree triangle. What if the longer leg is 15? To go backwards, the shortcut is to divide the 15 by 3 and then multiply it with square root of 3. To get the hypotenuse, we still double the short side. To double the short side, we only double the 5. We do not double the square root of 3. Let's try another one of those. The long side is 9. To get the short side, divide by 3 and multiply it with the square root of 3. To get the hypotenuse, we double the short side. Oh, that's not doubling. Double it gives you a 6 square root of 3. Oh no! It's a 10. Again, how do you divide 10 by 3? We're going to avoid using decimals, so we're going to go ahead and just do 10 divided by 3 with the square root of 3. And then to get the hypotenuse, we just double that. 20 divided by 3, square root of 3. Go ahead and take a look at all 3 examples and try to memorize those properties. Alright, so when you do the special right triangles individually, it's not too bad. But when I mix in the 30, 60, 90s with the 45, 45, 90s they can get very confusing because their rules are very similar and they're very specific as well. So let's try to mix them all together and see if we can remember which rule belongs to which triangle. Let's start with the 30, 60, 90 right triangle. If the hypotenuse is 12, we can find the short side by taking half of it. And to find the long side, it's the same thing with the square root of 3 next to it. Let's jump down to a 45, 45, 90 degree triangle. If the hypotenuse is 12, to get the two legs, you divide it by 2, but this one has a square root of 2 next to it. And once you have one leg, the other leg should be identical. Let's go back to the top, the 30, 60, 90 right triangle. If the short leg is 12, to find the hypotenuse, we double it. And then to find the longer leg, we keep it the same, but with the square root of 3 next to it. Next example. "45, 45, 90. If one leg is 12, it's pretty easy to remember that the other leg is identical, just 12. And the hypotenuse is 12 with the square root of 2 next to it. Next one up, kind of similar to the last one. If the leg is 12, the other leg must be identical. And the hypotenuse is 12 as well, but with the square root of 2. All right, and then our last example for the day. If I give you a 30, 60, 90 right triangle and I give you the long leg to be 12, to find the short leg, we have to divide by 3 and then multiply it with the square root of 3. To get the hypotenuse, you double the short side with the square root of 3. Alright, so that was a lot of rules all on one slide. Try to memorize them however you can, and that will be all for today.